Hi, everyone. This is Maura Whittington from the Metuchen Public Library, and I am here tonight with a special presentation on lead poisoning from Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey. I'm with Ray and Iris, who will be giving the presentation. Take it over, Iris.
Hello, thank you for having us, Moira. My name is Iris Novas-Cooney. I am a Community Health Education Manager for the Department of Member Advocacy and Community Outreach Transformation. Our work is focused on health promotion across the state. And today we're going to talk about lead poisoning and lead poisoning prevention. Prior to the presentation, I will hand it over to my colleague Ray to talk about NJ Family Care. Ray?
Hi, thank you, Iris. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us. As Iris explained, my name is Raymond Martin. I am a community health rep in government programs for Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield, New Jersey. Prior to COVID, my responsibility was pretty much in the community, providing enrollment opportunities. You might have seen the big blue mobile units throughout up and down the highways. I'm one of the drivers of those units. So we used to be out in the communities often, providing health screenings and, as I explained, enrollment opportunities for the public. And now that COVID is here and it's kind of here to stay, our role has changed, but the dynamic of what we do is still the same. I'm still available to provide the enrollment opportunities for those that are uninsured and provide an opportunity for those that also have the insurance to be able to renew. So part of our culture is that we empower our members to achieve their best health by leading with strength, integrity, and innovation to generate substantial improvements in healthcare quality, affordability, and overall member experience. We have one of the largest New Jersey networks for covered doctors, more than 22,000. We offer no and low copayment programs, and there are also a variety of special need programs should you or someone, a member of your family, qualify for those types of benefits. Those services are available as well. So if you or a family member or friend may need assistance with enrolling for, or just have a general question about the insurance, I am available. Again, my name is Raymond Martin. My phone number I would supply in the chat box. But for those that may have a pen or paper handy, is 201-492-2961. Or you can reach me via email, Raymond_Martin@horizonblue.com. Thank you for having me. And I turn it back over to my colleague, Iris.
Thank you, Ray. So prior to today's presentation, I just want to make a note. Since the pandemic, New Jersey and across the nation has experienced an increase of food insecurities where because of change of job or because they may have gotten sick and either loss of employment or drastic economic change in their home, they are experiencing shortage of food in their home for themselves and their families. If you or anyone you know is experiencing food insecurities where they just don't have enough food to eat to get them through the week, or they just don't have enough money to get more food to get by, please don't hesitate to connect with us. We can provide you a list of local food pantries depending on where you live in New Jersey, and we're always happy to do so. You could always connect to Moira at the Metuchen Public Library, and she can relay that message to me, and I am happy to share that information with whichever individual that is in need. So please don't hesitate to connect with us in regards to your local food pantries that are available to you. So I am going to share my screen. Okay. And today's presentation is going to discuss lead poison and lead poison prevention. Lead poison is a metal that is poisonous to humans when it gets into our bodies. Before people knew how dangerous lead really was, it was used in a lot of different things such as paint, gasoline, cookware, and even crayons or toys. This is a very preventable disease, and with the right tools and knowledge, this is a conversation that you would have with your doctors to ensure that if you have been exposed to lead, that you are properly screened for lead poisoning. Mainly children, because children put everything in their mouths, especially in their earlier years, and because they're still developing, they are at higher risk for lead poison and the damaging effects of their development that lead poison has. Lead poison can be anywhere, in particles, in dust. It's found in toys, especially toys that have been imported. The United States has very strict regulations on production of, anything from toys to dishware, anything that's in ceramics or paint that have been historically known to have lead in them. But please also note that many homes in the state of New Jersey have been built before 1965, where those rules were revised and enforced, right? So lead can really manifest anywhere. And because New Jersey is such a developing state, right, with construction, it also disrupts lead that has been in place in older building constructions or home constructions. And once you do any type of renovation, it disrupts the lead and further exposes. So folks who work in construction also tend to carry that because it is found in dust particles, right? So there are many different ways that you could be exposed to lead and not know it, right? So many folks that live either in older homes, and it's not found as much in paint currently because of those strict guidelines, but it is found in the underlining of walls, especially if those homes or structures are older or have been built before 1965. So keep in mind that even when a home is renovated, if the structure of the home is much older, it could also have a negative impact and expose you and your family. Lead is also found in pipes, in like the water systems. The water systems are still very dated, and Newark actually it had a huge project to change out all the water piping within the city of Newark in order to reduce the amount of unnecessary lead exposure to their residents. But again, it is a very costly endeavor, and not every municipality in New Jersey has those efforts on their way. So keep in mind to speak to your healthcare provider to ensure that, especially with young children, that you are not being exposed to lead poisoning. There are also like myths associated with lead. Children must eat paint chips to get lead poisoning, and that's not, children are more often poisoned by swallowing the dust from lead poison than by eating the paint chips itself. So again, this tends to be suspended in dust particles, and once the dust particles settle, because of lack of constant hand hygiene and wiping down of surfaces, it is really important to not only to keep your home clean to reduce your chances of like respiratory illness and infection, but it's also to reduce the likelihood of any dust particles that may have lead in them and come into your home and settle to be absorbed in the body. So keep in mind that it's not just in paint that you find lead, but it's also suspended in dust particles, and it settles onto furniture. Another myth is only high lead levels or levels of lead have lasting effects on children. And that's not necessarily true. The reality is that even a low level of exposure to lead can cause long-term effects in child's learning and behavior. Because children are still developing, from the time that they're born through about 2021, they're still developing their organs, their bones, their brain development. And if they have been exposed to lead, it could disrupt that healthy development and really cause long-lasting damage to that organ, especially in the brain. So please be sure to take your children to your pediatric checkups. And even as adults, if you feel that you have lead exposure, like a person in your family working in construction and coming in, we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on in the talk, but make sure that you're talking to your doctors to screen you and your families for lead, especially young children. It's really important to do that because if you identify it early enough, there are interventions that can be done to mitigate that exposure. Another myth is just having lead paint in your home means an infant is at risk of lead poisoning. And the reality is that undamaged and lead paint generally poses no immediate danger to infants and toddlers, but when lead paint chips deteriorates, right, when it starts to chip or crack, children tend to swallow the particles, the dust particles, and or the pieces of chipping or damaged pieces to paint chips on the wall or anywhere else in your home. Small children, especially from the age of like 0 to about 5 or 6, sometimes 7, they tend to put everything in their mouths, and again, their hand hygiene isn't always the best, but understand too that lead exposure can be consumed either, by water, the drinking water, if the lead if the pipes are lead lined. And also, you want to make sure that your doctor is doing a full assessment that includes lead poisoning exposure.
Excuse me, Iris.
Poison.
There's a
Yes.
question in the chat box for you.
Go ahead.
iPhone user 6858 wants to know, do companies still sell products with possible lead contents? Is it legal for them to sell items like that?
That's a very good question. So there are very strict guidelines depending on what that company is manufacturing, right? There are, depending on what they're making, will depend on what levels of acceptable lead can be used for that material, right? So for example, ceramics, dishes, pottery, that's made here in the United States has to comply with those guidelines of a certain lead level to be under that for it to not cause a risk. But again, living in a globalized society where we're getting goods from, India, China, from Central and South America, from all over the world, those guidelines they're not universal. Right. So it's important to understand that, one, the best way to ensure that you are not exposed to lead poisoning is to visit your doctor. A simple blood examination, a blood panel can screen for elevated lead levels, exposures, and there's treatment ensue that can help, reduce and mitigate that. But again, there are many things too that culturally folks use and integrate, like, for example, spices. Sometimes it's in makeup. some oftentimes is in pottery, like things that you eat off of, and that leaches out onto the goods, and you can absorb it either through your skin or consumed. So understanding where your goods are that you're consuming come from is a really important piece. But again, circle back with your doctor, because a simple blood work can determine whether or not you've been negatively exposed to lead. Does that help answer your question? Awesome. Are there any other questions? I can't hear you.
Wait, there is another question.
Yes.
Do products that are made outside the USA list that they have possible lead inside, or can it have lead without us knowing?
So it can have lead without you knowing, because remember, guidelines to whatever it is that's being made outside of the United States they're different from country to country, right? The United States has specific guidelines depending on what they're manufacturing. For example, for toys, right? They have like a specific guideline. And for things like pottery, like plates and dishes that you eat off of, there are other guidelines, right? But that doesn't always, it's not across the board or universal for other countries, right? So we just have to, the first and foremost is, once you go to your doctor, ask your doctor, are you checking for elevated levels when you take my blood, right? And if they are not, you can ask them to do that. It's a simple check of the box once they take a blood sample for your regular checkups. But for children, especially younger children, it is part of the assessment to check for lead poisoning because it really does disrupt their development, causing behavioral changes and developmental changes and milestone. It could really have long damaging effects during the early years when the child is still developing, is still ripe, right? Not all their organs are fully formed, not all the bones and muscles, they're still growing, right? So you wanna catch it early if they are exposed so that they can be treated swiftly, and then get given the right resources to make sure that there's no long lasting damage. Any other questions, Ray? Those are excellent questions, by the way. Great job.
No questions, Iris. No further questions.
Okay. So moving on, all young children should be tested for lead poisoning, as I said before. And there are a variety of different myths, right? Lead poisoning is a health problem that only doctors can solve. And that's not necessarily true if, as a community, we have a higher understanding that we can be exposed to lead poisoning and the negative effects of that, where it can do damaging developmental effects in young children that can be long lasting throughout the trajectory of their life. This is a simple conversation, again, that you can have with your healthcare providers and make sure that you are being screened, right, for lead poisoning, among other screenings. Bad parenting is to blame for lead poisoning in their children, and that is not necessarily true. Lead poison exposure can come from a variety of things, and most folks unknowingly are aware that they are exposing themselves and their loved ones to lead. So there are definite tricks that we can do and implement to our daily living to reduce our risk of lead poisoning. So again, the main focus here is to ensure that you're catching, if you are exposed to lead poisoning, you're catching it early so that your medical team can provide the treatment that you need. And also the early intervention team, which is the team that oversees the healthy development of young children, does the analysis and the assessments to ensure that that child is developing in a healthy way. So in the homes, remember I said earlier that many homes in New Jersey were built, are older homes, right? My home included. My home was built in 1908. They did not have these guidelines during the time that it was originally built, right? But now they do. Right. So, and this can be lead can be, or higher lead levels can be found in like older windows, in older wall structures, in toys, and also can be found in foods. Remember, many of the spices that we consume are also imported, and it may not necessarily be in the spice once it's like made, but the container that they put this spice in to be moved from one place to another before it's packaged can be lead lined or have higher levels of lead in them. And the lead is released into those spices, right? Contaminating those spices. And again, it's a metal, so it tends to preserve. It's has a very long shelf life, right? So, and spices are consumed a little bit at a time. So it's like you're exposing yourself little by little. So make sure that the spices that you consume are manufactured. I can ensure that the spices that are manufactured in the United States follow specific guidelines, but those spices that come outside of the United States, make sure that you know that they may have lead in them. And you wanna, again, make sure that you check in with your doctors to check your lead levels individually. If you go to the doctor and you've been using spices, let's say, my family's from the Dominican Republic, they don't usually bring spices from the Dominican Republic, but even in local supermarkets, you can find spices that are manufactured outside of the United States. If you choose to use those spices, that's fine, but make sure that you are being tested at your doctor's office to ensure that you're not being exposed to lead. Peeling paint is always an issue, not only because of the peeling paint and the likelihood of small children, putting it in their mouth and swallowing it, but also peeling paint releases dust that goes in the air. And again, we breathe that in and can expose us to lead. And remember that dust settles onto furniture, your floors, anywhere in your home. So keeping a clean home, right, where you wipe down surfaces, is also not only great to reduce your risk for lead exposure, but it's really great to reduce your risk for respiratory illnesses and allergies. Again, some foods also contain elevated levels of lead. And again, keep in mind that in the packaging and in the area where it was actually manufactured, if there is dust particles that have lead in them, it can fall into the product that's being manufactured, and like a lollipop that you see in front of you. And when you consume it, you're also consuming those particles that may have settled into whatever's being manufactured. So protect yourself, right? And from the exposure of lead. Make sure that the paint that you use, it does not have lead in them. Usually paint are lead free, but to ensure that you could always ask when you're purchasing paint. Make sure that you are mindful that imported goods do not follow the same guidelines that we have to follow here with manufactured goods in the United States. So be sure that if you are unsure of whatever it is that you're consuming, or perhaps like it's also been found in like makeup, make sure that you ask your doctor to test you for lead exposure. Again, herbal remedies, vitamins, and things of that nature, because of the way that it's manufactured and the dust particles, perhaps, or the shipping container that it was once in, it could leach out lead and contaminate the goods. So just be mindful of that. your lead line pipes are also a major issue. So it could, small amounts of lead over a long period of time in the water can definitely increase the likelihood of negative health effects from lead poisoning. And again, some ceramic hardware that you use when you're eating food off of them. Ensure that whatever silverware and platters that you're using have been under the guidelines of reducing lead, especially if they are imported. And remember, as soon as you put food on them, it's releasing things onto your food and negatively affects or expose you to lead. So again, being aware, and all this information I can share with Moira, and she can, share along if you'd like. But definitely keeping small children away from chipping or peeling paint is really important. And lead-based paint and lead paint, dust eaten or inhaled are the main cause of lead poisoning today. Again, older homes leach out lead, and if in the home the person works in construction, they come home with a lot of dust particles on their clothes, on their shoes. So there are ways like, for example, taking off their clothes before coming into, or as they come into the home, removing their clothes in a designated area and taking off their shoes so they're not spreading those dust particles throughout the home is an important piece. Making sure that they're washing their clothes or separating them from the other folks' laundry, things of that nature really does help reduce lead exposure or unnecessary lead exposure to your family, especially with young children. Really healthy hand hygiene is essential, not only for lead exposure, but also in general for airborne respiratory illnesses, right? We're in flu season, we have the pandemic, the coronavirus, roaring right now. So make sure that you're washing your hands thoroughly. It's just generally good hygiene practices that help keep you healthy. The washing of baby bottles, pacifiers, toys, especially when children are, from the age of 0 to about, 5, when they tend to put things in their mouths constantly is really important. So make sure that you're wiping toys down, you're wiping surfaces down, anywhere that you're touching consistently, like the refrigerator handle, microwave, counters, tables, chairs, wipe them down to ensure that dust particles that settle have been removed. And avoid lead in drinking water, right? Make sure that your drinking water is safe to drink. And another way that you can check this is once you go to the doctor, you ask them to screen for lead poisoning. Do not store food in metal cans after they have been opened. So like metal containers, is a metal. So you want to make sure that you're using ideally a glass container or a plastic container that's free of BPA. And again, you avoiding using ceramic ware or pottery or antiques or pewter or silver, as they, in manufacturing them, may have higher elevated levels of lead in them. And the last point is really to keep children's play area confined to a specific area where you can ensure that there's no chipping paint, that is, free of dust, or that you're routinely cleaning it down. Those are healthy practices in general, and make sure that you're wiping down their toys frequently. Teach children to throw away food that hasn't fallen to the floor or ground. If anything touches the floor, remember that it's picking up anything that comes from outside of your home, inside of your home, from underneath your shoes, right? So if it falls on the ground, don't consume it. Okay, make sure that there's, everyone is sitting in a space where you're minimizing that. But if things, accidents happen and they fall on the ground, consider it a loss. And again, it's to ensure that you're not exposing yourself not only to lead, but all the other bacteria, germs, and viruses that that we bring in from the outside of our home back in. So lead is 100% preventable. Again, connect with your doctors to check and screen you for lead poisoning. And amongst others, they do an ample blood panel where they check for your organ enzymes to make sure that everything's functioning correctly. They check, your cholesterol, your blood sugar, amongst other things. Please speak to your doctors to ensure that everything's functioning well with your body, and talk to them about vaccinations. It is flu season, so if you are healthy enough to get a flu shot, please get a flu shot. Also, practicing healthy hygiene habits is critical, important to reduce your exposure, right? So when you come into your house, take off your shoes and make sure to wipe down the surfaces of your home and wipe down the floors to reduce dust particles that settle. Renovate safely, right? That when you're doing any type of home renovations, please understand that many of the homes have been built, they're older homes. And anytime you break down and renovate, that also disrupts anything that's in the wall and turns into dust, and we're breathing that, right? So ensure that you're keeping your home clean and clear, and the folks living in them from negative exposures to lead from dust, right, from construction. And please pay attention to recalled toys and jewelries. Many toys that have been found to have higher levels of lead have been recalled. So when you do see it either on the news or if you get an email alert, pay attention. If you see it on social media, pay attention. Even if it's not for you, you may have a loved one that has small children. Bring it to their attention. If any toys or jewelry or platters, things of that nature, or makeup that has been recalled, pay attention to those things because they really can pose a significant health hazard. One of the ways that we can, limit the ongoing damage of lead poisoning is to make sure that we're consuming foods that tend to absorb those metals from our bodies, right? In general, everyone should be practicing healthy eating habits because our food is our main source of medicine, right? So understanding to some foods that really do help reduce the risk of lead poisoning if you have been exposed, but they're just naturally good for you too, right? And they have the added bonus of absorbing those metals from the body. So things that are rich in calcium, like milk, yogurt, cheese, but also green leafy vegetables like spinach and kale and broccoli. Those are really high source of calcium foods that help absorb any metals in the body. Iron is in lean red meats, beans, peanut butter, and cereals, right? So make sure that you're integrating those legumes into your diet to help reduce your risk of any dangerous metals that may be lurking in your system. And high levels of vitamin C is always good for you. It boosts your immune system and it helps your body fight off any toxins in the body, right? So foods that are rich in vitamin C are citrus like orange and lemons and limes, but also peppers, right? And the variety of colors of peppers too are rich in vitamin C. So the variety of different vegetables and fruits and healthy grains and lean proteins really does help your body fight off these toxins and eliminate them. And then to add to a healthy diet, you always need to hydrate. So make sure that you're drinking plenty of water, right, to help your organs absorb the nutrients and get rid of waste. Okay, so plenty of water throughout the day. A good gauge would be half your body weight in ounces. So if I weigh 100 pounds, a good guideline for me, I should be consuming about 50 ounces of water from the start of my day when I wake up in the morning until nighttime when I go to bed. So again, it's not 50 ounces in one shot. It's throughout the day. Stay hydrated. So I am gonna pause right here and turn it over for any additional questions.
Does anybody have any other questions? I did not see anything in the chat box.
Okay. So I'm just going to close it that even if a person or especially in children, if they have been exposed to lead poisoning, it is very treatable. But what we want to bring awareness is the prevention side, right? Because there's no better medicine than prevention, right? If you don't have it, if you're healthy, we want to keep you healthy. So be mindful to connect with your doctors. Make sure that you're getting those well checkups. And whether you're healthy or if you have a chronic illness, there are ways to live healthy even with chronic illnesses. So make sure you have that conversation with your doctors about lead and the different screening tools that they have to reduce your risk.
Thank you so much, Iris and Ray. I really appreciate this. And if anybody has any questions, can I feel free to contact you?
Absolutely. Okay. You can contact us, of course.
Okay. Well,
and if any are experiencing any type of food insecurity, please feel free to also share that information.
I definitely will. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out with me. It will also be posted on YouTube, as I said, and it'll be posted on IGTV as well as hopefully the library's website. So if people have more questions, you look it over again. I know it was a lot to comprehend. Feel free to contact me. It's National Lead Poisoning Prevention Week, so an awareness. So this is a great program to have. Thank you so much for coming, and I will see everybody soon. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Okay, Iris. Oh, she already left.